You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like tinfoil, but way better.
It's like tinfoil, but way better.
Howdy folks, and welcome to a special episode hosted by Strange Encounters. If you're a fan of UFOs, aliens, paranormal, or unexplained stories, you should check out his channel. Link will be in the description. He uploads more frequently than I do, so there will be plenty to keep you entertained.
Heart Surgery Link, My Experience with Aliens by Jason B.L., 1974. I live in Australia, and I'm in my late 40s. Between the ages of 2 to 7, I had 3 heart surgeries, including 3 heart valve replacements. My first 2 replacements saw valves from pig hearts placed into my heart. In my final operation, the pig's valve was replaced with an artificial valve made of plastic and metal. The same valve is still in my heart more than 40 years later. My experience happened to me sometime after turning 5, so I had already had 2 heart surgeries and 2 valve replacements. I believe the surgeries may have been what caused these alien beings to be interested in me. This is the first time I have ever shared this story. I've never spoken of this with family or friends. This is my experience. I knew I was asleep in my bed in my bedroom at home. I knew I woke up and I was no longer in my bedroom. Instead, I was in a very dark room, lying on a black bed. The bed was narrow and its length was just right. The bed looked like it was made of stone, but did not feel hard, cold, or uncomfortable. There were no sheets or blankets on the bed. I was not naked on the bed, but I knew I was wearing very little. At least my torso was exposed. At this stage of my life, I had experienced 2 heart surgeries, and I had a long, large, visible scar running from the top of my breastbone down to just above my belly button. There were beings in the room, and they were examining me. I knew they were not human. I knew they were not of Earth. The beings were short and very stocky and blocky. Their skin looked like dark stone. Their faces were featureless except for their eyes, which were wholly black, yet shiny. I don't remember the shape of their eyes. I don't remember them wearing obvious clothing or looking in any way distinct from each other. I couldn't tell if they were male or female or if they had any gender. They were quite featureless, in fact. Perhaps they were hiding or cloaking their appearance to not frighten me. There were 5 or 6 figures with me, and 1 or 2 held some sort of diagnostic or medical equipment. I couldn't clearly see these devices, as they were also black and did not have any obvious lights or screens on them. The devices emitted no sound. The devices were being waved over my body, especially my chest area. No device penetrated my skin. I didn't feel any pain or odd sensations from the use of this equipment. I did not feel fear at any point in the experience. Remember, I was about 5 years old. This should have been more like a nightmare, or it should have frightened me half to death. But I felt safe. I knew the beings wouldn't hurt me, and I knew they were intrigued by me and wanted to learn more about me and what happened to my heart. I don't know how I knew this, I just did. Maybe it was from how they treated me. As they moved about me and examined me, they were slow and steady. They were not rushed or rough with me. I didn't cry at all through the experience. I didn't call out for my mother. When I woke, I didn't feel fear, and I knew I had not been crying. There are a few reasons for why I believe I had a genuine experience with alien beings. I knew I had been taken from my room. I had the physical experience or sensation of being in a very different space. I knew that I was not in my home or in any place I could associate with. The place felt alternate and alien. Perhaps I was on a ship, a UFO, or a UAP. The room was featureless, so it's hard to be specific about where I was. I knew the beings around me were not human. They did not look or act like humans. There was no speech. I saw the beings using tools and technologies on me that was not of human origin. By this time in my life, I had experienced 2 heart surgeries. I had been hooked up to heart and lung machines, hooked up to ECG and EEG machines, hooked up to oxygen/breathing machines, and I had been exposed to needles. I had been in multiple doctors' offices, hospital operating rooms, and hospital wards. I knew what human-made medical equipment looked like. The equipment these beings used to examine me was wholly alien. I did have an interest in science fiction and superheroes by this point in my life. I'd seen the original Star Wars and Superman movies, but I had never seen a movie or cartoon about aliens, UFOs, or alien abductions. I became interested in aliens and UFOs much later in life, in my teens. What do you think happened to me? Was I taken? Was I examined? Did I visit a craft or another time and space? Did I meet aliens? I'd love to know what you think. Alien Contact by OKLaw7130. I've been having a lot of things happen to me recently that have made me think back on something very odd that happened when I was younger. I am currently a 23-year-old male, and I live a relatively normal life. Rewind back to when I was 7 years old, and a kid in my neighborhood had been abducted. Abducted by a person, that is. A 5-year-old boy was kidnapped through his open window on the second story. I lived in a pretty upscale neighborhood at the time, so things like that just didn't happen around that area. It caused a lot of panic among the parents around town. That panic obviously shifted to fear, and that fear was felt by us kids with the story on the news to back it up. It was enough to give any child nightmares. Fast forward a few months later, when the story had faded from the news outlets, and the panic slowly faded as well. I, however, would have nightmares sometimes about someone coming into my room and taking me. My parents would always check the locks on my windows and reassure me that I would be just fine, but the nightmares continued for some time. I recall one very specific dream that stood out from the rest, however. I was in my bedroom with my little brother's room next door and my parents' room down the hall. I was the last one awake because I went around the house crawling like a military man on a mission, trying not to get caught by my parents so that I could sneak into the living room and watch TV past my bedtime. Anyway, I ended up falling asleep on the couch. Not something I did because that obviously would blow my cover in the morning. I remember waking up at the very early stages of morning, maybe 2 to 3 a.m. I turned off the TV and walked to my room. I laid down in bed, pulled the covers over my head, and closed my eyes. Then I hear a tapping sound. I pull my covers down instantly. Something had just tapped on my window. I go into full panic mode, but I can't bring myself to move or scream. The tap happened again. Now I am hyperventilating, but something compelled me to pull my curtains back. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains back, and saw nothing. Before I go any further, I would like to make something clear. Growing up, I was very adventurous. This, however, was completely out of my comfort zone. Anyways, for some unknown reason, I took my screen off my window and opened my window so that I could crawl out. Next thing I know, I'm standing barefoot in my pajama bottoms in my sandy backyard. To this day, I can remember how weird it felt. What comes next is a blur. I remember walking down the road and seeing a house that was very distinctive because it had been struck by lightning 3 times in the last year and had nearly burnt to the ground each time. This house was several blocks away from my house, but still in the neighborhood. I remember a child's yellow slide coming from the second-story window down to the ground floor on the outside of the house. I proceeded to walk up to the house and make my way up the slide. As I started to get closer to the top of the slide, I could hear what sounded like a family having dinner. I got to the top and peeked inside. It was a family, but they were completely white, with no distinctive facial features. I can't recall what I saw them doing, but I remember thinking they were vampires. Whatever I saw them do scared me to the point of me falling down into the house. I landed on my back. The room spun for a moment, and the last thing I remember was 3 of them standing over me. The next thing I know, it's 7:30 a.m. The alarm clock rings. Thank God it was just a dream. I pull my covers down and wipe my eyes, slide my feet to the side of my bed, and my feet are filthy. After I take notice of this, I try to stand up. I immediately crash to the floor when a sharp lightning-like pain shot through my leg. I physically could not get up. I screamed for my parents, who initially thought I was making it up to get out of going to school. My dad had noticed my screen was missing from my window and gave me a stern look of disbelief when I told him I didn't know what happened to it. Once they realized I was in excruciating pain and I couldn't stop crying, they took me to the ER for x-rays. This is when I got really freaked out. The x-ray showed a hole punch in my femur. The doctor said he'd never seen anything like it and had absolutely no idea what could have caused it. Dumbfounded, we left the hospital with pain meds and a follow-up appointment that would end up amounting to me making a full recovery. To this day, I don't know if that was a dream or if I actually experienced something truly extraordinary that night. I was wondering if anyone else has ever experienced anything similar.
And as always, thanks for stopping by. Stay safe, and don't forget to check out Strange Encounters. Link will be in the description.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like tinfoil, but way better.